Christopher Robichaud is Senior Lecturer in Ethics and Public Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and Director of Pedagogical Innovation at the Edmund J. Safra Center for Ethics. He received his doctorate in philosophy from MIT. Dr. Robichaud has been a member of the faculty since 2006. Previously, he has taught philosophy courses at Texas A&M University, the University of Vermont in Burlington, and Tufts University. Robichaud teaches an engaging session on ethical decision-making in the National Preparedness Leadership Initiative Executive Education Program. Among Robichaud's innovations seen in the session is his work to transform the ethics curriculum into a case-based and situation-based enterprise. He has devoted considerable energy to creating simulations that give professionals opportunities to explore ethical decision-making in the context of practicing leadership skills and engaging in negotiations. In 2015, he was the first recipient of the Innovation in Teaching Award at Harvard Kennedy School. Today, I will speak with Robichaud about his MPLI ethics decision-making session, why it is important to understand ethical frameworks, and how best to deploy them in the kind of real-world situations faced by NPLI participants. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Sure.
Why is it so important to include a session on ethical decision-making in a program like the NPLI?
I think the importance of having ethics in the program comes from at least two places. One ground up, other top down. Ground up is people who are involved in public service broadly, especially people who find themselves often on the front lines of dealing with emergency situations, have spent some time thinking about the values and principles that are informing their actions and the policies of the organizations that they're involved with. That's the bottom up. From the top down, I think that if you're interested in leadership, part of that interest should involve reflecting on the moral values that inform your own thinking and the thinking of the people that you work with and the thinking of the organization that you are a part with. We don't want it to be the case that you just wake up every morning assuming that you've gotten it all right when it comes to ethics. There are reasonable disagreements amongst reasonable people about what the right course of action is over a wide range of actions. And what we want to do in the program is give participants a little experience thinking about that, occupying that space, disagreeing with each other, seeing how a variety of different people can view a situation through different moral lenses.
And of course, one of the challenges, I imagine, is that when you bring people together, both in the class and also in the real world in a response, they come with different notions of ethics, and some may have had formal training, but many may have not,
Yes.
and they have different ways of processing. Is that what you see?
I see a ton of that, and for me it's awesome. For some people it can be disorienting. I think especially the older we get, the more work experience that we have, the more convinced we become that we figured it out when it comes to ethics, and the more off-putting it can sometimes be to have someone else sit right next to us and say, no, I think you got this wrong. I see this completely differently. But when we take a few steps back from that, we realize, well, these are hard issues, and there can be a wide range of approaches to solving hard ethical dilemmas. See the world through someone else's eyes. That's not the same thing as agreeing with them. It's not the same thing as changing one's whole moral framework. Just building the capacity to look at a situation from a variety of different moral perspectives and then acting.
Your work really sits at the intersection of two dimensions of meta leadership, the person and the situation. So it's who you are, and you say what your moral framework is, what do you bring to the equation?
Yes.
But also the context in which you confront that challenge.
Yes.
What you want participants to take away from this session?
I want them to take away a few things, right? And I've already pointed to one of those, which is I want them to take away the ability, the recognition and the ability to entertain different moral frameworks when looking at a situation. I think it's important for good quality leadership to be able to have that capacity to navigate the world through different moral lenses, while also having the capacity to then make a decision and act and embrace a certain set of values. But I think it's also just really important to learn how to talk to each other and to, participants of our program, they come from all different sectors. They all have a tremendous amount of experience about really hard questions. And they've all landed in different places in terms of what they think needed to be done. And I think it's great to have that conversation and to learn from how other people have wrestled with this. One of the things I love with any moral situation is when people reflect on it, they will often bring their personal experiences into it. Oh, I had to make a decision similar to that because of my parent, because of my child, because of an old friend, and so forth. And they bring that in. And someone else may not have access to that same sort of experience. And so you can learn quite a bit just by hearing someone else wrestle with that. Coming out of that, though, I think is a real important lesson that I would like our participants to take back with them, which is ethics is hard. And I know that seems obvious, but when you interview people who have had to make some really challenging decisions, one of the things they always will say is, well, it was a really tough decision, but I know I did the right thing. And I'd like them to back away from that a little bit and at least entertain the possibility that maybe they did get it wrong. Maybe there's another way to go about it. Not because I want to cause a crisis in their thinking, but because I want them to recognize that you had to act, you acted, and no one's going to criticize that. But we should spend some time thinking about, did you get it right? Is it possible that you didn't? How might someone else who completely disagrees with you see that? And become comfortable in that space.
Yeah, moral certitude is a very dangerous thing.
It is a very dangerous thing, yes.
So on a pragmatic level, are there tools or techniques they're going to walk away with?
I hope so. One of the things that we want to do in our session is to give students the ability to move in and out of a scenario in real time. So I simulate scenarios, and what I want them to be able to do is, rather than go through a whole scenario and then look back at what they did and go, I wonder why I did that, to rather say, while they're doing it, wait a minute, how am I approaching this from a moral standpoint, and how could I be approaching this from a moral standpoint? Now, to be able to get students to do that in real time requires giving them some comfort with a set of concepts and conceptual categories so that they can divide up moral space in some different ways, and to give them some skills on stopping themselves and stepping back and saying, I don't want to be on autopilot right now. I think that one of the core techniques that we emphasize in our sessions, but also then encourage students to do afterwards, participants to do afterwards, is bump into people who disagree with you so that you can become better and better at generating those perspectives on your own when you've got no one else around to do so.
You talk about simulations, and that brings up another interesting part of your work, which is that it does bring innovation into ethics, which are not two things you think of going together. But I know you've done a lot of work to bring more case-based discussion, more simulations into the space. Talk a bit about that and how it works.
I've been working at a professional school for enough years now to recognize that a conversation that remains just on the chalkboard, here are moral principles, here's consequentialism, here's deontology, it can go well at the level of concepts. But if it's divorced entirely from taking that and bringing it into an arena of practice, then it just doesn't stick with students. It's intellectually satisfying, but there's no bridge to practice to bringing that into one's work. So what I found, and what increasing research is telling us, is that when you can embed that sort of conversation into a rich case or a simulated exercise, it sticks better. And so rather than having an abstract conversation about what the demands of justice are, you put it into a case where that's what the protagonist is wrestling with. You still have the conceptual rigor, but you now put it into a person making a hard decision, and people will carry that case with them as they leave the program, as they go through years of more experience, much more readily. They'll carry that with them much more readily than just the abstract conversation. Even more so, I think, with simulated exercises. Simulated exercises, the advantage there is you're forcing folks to make a decision right there on the spot and then to reflect on it. And so you're narrowing any distance that might come. You can look at a case and go, well, I wouldn't behave that way. But in a simulation, you just behave that way.
Right, yeah. And I've noticed when I watch the students do this, the participants around a table, they really get animated. They really get invested in what's going on.
Yes.
And in a way, it's a whole different level of engagement and conversation than you have when any of us is at the front of the room talking with a chalkboard or a set of slides.
Yeah, we're just learning more and more from the behavioral sciences that, and it's a moment of humility for all of us. We, each of us, are often the worst people in the world to judge what we really value. We think we know what we value. Right. We'll say the principles that guide our actions, but you don't really know until you do it. And so one thing that I like about simulations is you're put into a group or you're doing it on your own, and you have to make decisions and you have to deal with those consequences. And then you can look at your action and say, all right, well, this is what I did. Now what have I learned about what I, in fact, really value and what principles really guide my thinking?
Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you.